Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to go over about 4 problems or 4 of the equations that we were given during our scavenger hunt today. So for number 1, we're asked to find the slope first. So the slope is going to be the understood 1 in front of the x because it's already in slope-intercept form. So we've got slope is 1. Then we're asked what the point is. When I say the point, I mean we're given an x and y values of the new equation that we're trying to create for a parallel and a perpendicular. So our point that was given was -1, -1. Now, only looking at given slope and point, we're going to find our parallel equation. Our parallel equation is not the exact same equation that was given. If it was the exact same equation that was given, then it would not be parallel because the y-intercepts have to be different from parallel lines. So we're going to have to come in here and say, okay, well, it has to be y equals, our slopes have to be the same, so it has to be 1x. And we've got to figure out what our new y-intercept is going to be. So we're going to substitute in our x and our y from the point that was given. So -1 equals 1, instead of x, I'm putting -1 plus b. So once I do this, I distribute 1 times -1, so I get -1 equals -1 plus b. To move that -1, I'm going to add 1 to both sides, add 1. -1 plus 1 just gives me 0. -1 plus 1 gives me 0, so those go away. So my new y-intercept has to be 0. So with the given slope, or with the parallel slope of 1, and with the y-intercept of 0, I can write y equals 1x plus 0. But I can simplify both the 1 and the 0. I can simplify the 1 because I don't have to put 1 there. Just like there was an understood 1 in front of the x for a slope, I don't have to put the 1 in front. So I can just write y equals x plus 0. I also don't really have to write the plus 0. The plus 0 is not telling me anything but the y-intercept. So as far as the value goes, y equals x is the only thing I need to write. Now for the perpendicular is just a little bit more complicated, just one more step is all it is. So we're given slope 1, so our perpendicular slope is going to be from 1, we're going to change it to -1. The reason why is because there's an understood 1 underneath the one that was given, and there's also a 1 underneath the -1. So for perpendicular slope, you're going to change the positive to a negative, and then you're going to flip the fraction. Well, 1/1 flipped is still 1/1. So don't overthink it. So now our slope has to be -1. So we're going to start with y equals -1x plus b. And again, our b, even for our perpendicular, is not going to be the same as our parallel. It's going to be a completely different line, different equation. So we're going to substitute in. The only thing they have in common is our x and our y, because we know for a fact it goes through our point that was given. So our y is -1 equals -1. Instead of x, I'm putting -1 plus b, and now I'm finding what b is. So -1 times -1 is +1 plus b. Well, to move that 1 away from that b so it's by itself, I do subtract 1. Subtract 1. 1 minus 1 gives me 0, so they go away. On the left side, I've got -1, subtract 1, which gives me -2 equals b. So I know my slope has to be -1, and I know now that my y-intercept has to be -2. So my new equation is going to look like y equals -1 x minus 2. Again, you can simplify this one more time because that 1 is not needed in front of the x. So you've got y equals -x minus 2. So that would be for number 1. Now let's look at number 4. Number 4 gives us y equals 1/2 times x, and our point is 8, -10. Well, our slope that's given is already in slope-intercept form, so the coefficient of x is 1/2, and that's going to give us the slope. Our point, again, is 8, -10. So once we identify the slope and once we know our point, that's all we need to know to find our parallel equation and our perpendicular equation. The rest of this note card, I don't really care about. So our parallel equation, we're going to have the same slope. I'm going to write this just a little bit smaller, but I'm going to use a little bit of number 3's box. So I've got 1/2 as my slope, and I've got to figure out what b is. So I've got to substitute these in. So -10 is my y. Then I've got 1/2, and then instead of x, I want 8 plus b. Then I've got to come in here, do 1/2 times 8. I've got -10 equals 1/2 times 8 is 4 plus b. Got to move that 4 over to -10, so subtract 4, subtract 4. Then I'm left with b on the right side. And my left side, I've got -10 minus 4. Well, the signs are the same, so it's going to stay the same. And 10 plus 4 is 14. So all of this to say, my slope has to be 1/2. My y-intercept has to be -4. So for number 4, I've got y equals 1/2 x minus 14. Now for the next one, we've got to find our perpendicular equation. So given our 1/2, we know that our slope has to be -2/1. So we went from 1/2 to -2/1 because we changed the sign and flipped it. Then we have x plus b. We are figuring out what b is by substituting in our x and our y. So -10 equals, I'm going to put just -2. And instead of x, I'm putting in 8 plus b. I'm going to substitute, or I'm going to distribute -2 to the 8. So -10 equals negative times a positive gives me a negative 16 plus b. To move the -16 away so the b can be by itself, I'm going to add 16. Add 16. -16 plus 16 goes away. -10 plus 16, or aka 16 minus 10, gives me 6 equals b. So I know that my slope has to be -2 and my y-intercept has to be 6. So I've got y equals -2x plus 6. Now, I am going to skip to number 7. And this is what we're given for number 7. So first we have to find our given slope. So looking at this, I'm going to find at least 2 pretty points. And when I say pretty points, I mean ones that are actually at the intersection of the coordinate plane. So here's one, and here's another one. We have to find our slope, so reading from left to right always, just like we read anything else, we're going to figure out what we have to do to get from the first point to the second point. So we either rise or fall first. We're going to fall 1, so our slope is going to be positive 1 at the top. And then we're going to run to the right 1, so that's going to be a positive 1. So that is going to be our slope. That equals 1. Now the second box that we had to find was our point, so that's -3, -1. And then using that information, we're going to find our parallel and perpendicular equation going through this point. I no longer care about the equation or the line that was given. I'm looking for my new parallel and perpendicular line through this point. So I'm going to come in here. I know my parallel line has to have the same slope, so 1x plus b. I'm going to substitute in my points. So instead of y, I've got -1 equals 1. Instead of x, I've got -3 plus b. 1 times -3 is going to give me -3 plus b. To move the -3 to the other side, I'm going to add it. -3 plus 3 gives me 0, so it goes away. Now I've got -1 plus 3, or 3 minus 1, which gives me 2, equals b. All of this to say that my slope is going to be 1, and my y-intercept is going to be 2. So my equation, my parallel equation is y equals 1x plus 2. We can simplify this one more time by saying y equals x plus 2. And that's going to be our parallel equation. Now our perpendicular equation. We've got to change our slope to perpendicular slope. So we started with 1, and we're going to go to -1. Remember, you start with 1 over 1. You want to change the positive to a negative, and then this also has a 1 underneath it, understood. So our perpendicular equation has to have a slope of -1. We're going to have x plus b. We're going to substitute in our y that was given, which is -1. So -1 equals -1. Instead of x, I'm putting it -3, because that's what's given, plus b. So we're going to distribute that -1. So we're going to have -1 equals negative times a negative gives you a positive. And you have 1 times 3, which is just 3, plus b. You want the 3 to go on the other side, so b can be by itself. So subtract 3, -1 minus 3 is -4 equals b, because 3 and -3 is 0. So now, all of that to say, your slope has to be -1, your y-intercept has to be -4, so your perpendicular equation should be y equals -1x minus 4, and you can write it as -x minus 4. And that would be your perpendicular equation.